Hey guys, today is Thursday, July 21st, and I'll be updating my prediction for the 2022 Senate elections, which are in less than 4 months, and in just a few months' time, we will find out which party will control the upper chamber for the latter half of President Biden's first term. So looking at the current makeup of the Senate, it is 50-50 after Democrats flipped it in 2020 for the first time in 8 years, and so this majority will be very difficult for them to defend, as of course they cannot afford to lose a single seat if they want to hold on to control. And so that is why these Senate elections this November will be some of the closest ones that we have seen in decades. Looking at the 2020 map, it was good for the Democratic Party. They were able to make many big flips, especially in the states of Georgia and Arizona. But if you look at Senate elections in the last couple of years, they all went for the Republican Party. Before 2020, the last time Democrats won the Senate was all the way back in 2012 with the re-election of Barack Obama. And so right now in 2020, though, the Democratic Party is actually doing a lot better than expected. Honestly, the Democratic Party should not be in as good of a position as they are right now. The Democratic Party is down 20 points in terms of Joe Biden's approval rating. Joe Biden has a 37% approval rating. He is down by 20 points across the country. However, if you look at the generic congressional ballot and how voters feel about both parties, you'll see the Democratic Party is only down by 1.3%. Joe Biden is down by 20%. Democrats nationwide are only down by 1.3%. So yes, Joe Biden is going to hurt the Democrats in the midterm elections, but Joe Biden is only a small factor. I think the most important factor right now is candidate quality, and that is where Republicans are seriously lacking. The candidates they are running in the competitive races simply are not doing well, and the four most competitive races are Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, and right now, the Republicans as candidates in all four of these states are not performing well. In Nevada, we have Adam McSalt, Blake Masters in Arizona, Herschel Walker in Georgia, and of course, Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania. It's not just me saying that these candidates are not the most electable ones. Literally, if we look at the polling numbers in all four of these states, they really are doing abysmal compared to where they really should be at. And so I'm going to start off by filling in the solid states for both parties. So these are basically states you would expect to go to either party by margins of over 15%. So starting off with the solid Democratic states, I have all of the states on the West Coast as well as Illinois and then most of the North Atlantic. Now for the Republicans, I will be leaving out two states that I would typically categorize as being solid for the Republican Party, and those two states are the two states of Iowa and Utah. In those two races, I simply believe that these two races are going to be closer than they were in the previous election. Both of these races have Republican incumbents, but the Republican incumbents in these two states really are not performing anywhere near where they should. So starting off with the state of Iowa, we have a race between Chuck Grassley and Michael Franken. Chuck Grassley is a 7-time incumbent now running for his 8th term in office. Michael Franken is a former Navy Vice Admiral. Basically, that is the second highest achievable rank in the U.S. Navy. So Chuck Grassley is probably going to face the strongest challenge from any Democrat in the last 4 decades from Michael Franken. If we look at the latest polls that have been released for this race, Chuck Grassley is only led by 3 to 8% in all 3 of the recent polls released. Now, 2 of these polls were funded by the Franken campaign, so these numbers are likely to skew in favor of the Democrats here, but the most recent one conducted by the A-plus rated Seltzer & Co. only shows Chuck Grassley ahead by 8%, and this was an independent sponsored poll. So Chuck Grassley is going to face a difficult re-election this time around, but I think that it would be very unlikely that he did end up losing his re-election. If we look at the previous margins for the 8-time incumbent, I mean, look at the 2016 results. Chuck Grassley won by 24%. In 2010, he won by 31%, and of course in 2004, it was a margin of 42%. So Chuck Grassley has been very solid in Iowa over the last couple of decades, but his age is going to be an issue for this campaign. He will be well into his 90s if he finishes another 6-year term after being re-elected in 2022. And the other likely state for the Republicans I have is the state of Utah. Now, this state is, I think, going to be one of the most interesting in these midterm elections. We have a race between Mike Lee and Evan McMullin. Evan McMullin is not a Democrat. He is a conservative independent, and the Democrats in the state have chosen to endorse Evan McMullin instead of nominating their own candidate, and that is to prevent vote splitting. And so this has made it so that Evan McMullin really does stand a chance in this race. The Republican Party is not that popular in the state of Utah, and especially the Trump wing of the Republican Party, in which Mike Lee represents. So there's a very good chance that Evan McMullin may actually do very well against Mike Lee. I don't think he'll end up winning, but right now Mike Lee only leads by 9.6% in the polls, and if you look at the most recent poll release just a couple of days ago, Mike Lee is only ahead by a margin of 5%. I mean, this is an abysmal margin. If we looked at this race in 2016, the Republican Party won this race by 41%, and these are the typical margins you would see in the state of Utah. 2010, it was a margin of 29%. So the state of Utah really is going to be very competitive for Mike Lee this time around, and so that is why I can only categorize it as being likely for the GOP. And I do have one final likely state for the Republicans on this map, and not because they're doing poorly, but because they're actually doing surprisingly well, and that is the state of Florida. It will be a race between Marco Rubio, who is running for a third term in office, and Val Demings, who represents the 10th district of Florida in the U.S. House. I mean, just look at all the polling data here. Marco Rubio is clearly ahead in the state, and I think that he can actually win by double digits. He won by around 7% in 2016, but in 2018, we had one of the closest races of the year. I mean, the closest race of the 2018 midterms was in Florida, where Rick Scott defeated Democratic incumbent Bill Nelson by a margin of 0.1%. So really, the state of Florida is not trending well for the Democratic Party. The state continues to shift to the right, and that is hurting the Democrats' chances at not just future Senate elections, but also future presidential elections, as of course Florida was one of the big battleground states for a very long time. And so I do have one more likely state on this map, and it will go for the Democrats, and that is the state of Colorado. I think Colorado is going to be likely for Michael Bennet. Clearly, Michael Bennet is going to win this race against Joe Dia. Joe Dia does actually represent the more moderate wing of the Republican Party. He defeated Ron Hanks, who was the more Trump Republican. But if we look at the most recent poll release, Michael Bennet leads by 13 points. It's a guaranteed win for him, but the race probably is not going to be solid in the very end. And I did actually forget the state of Alaska. Alaska is going to be solid. Now, the interesting thing here is that it is going to be less than a margin of 15% for whoever wins, but the top two candidates, both Lisa Murkowski and Kelly Tshibaka, are both Republicans, so a Republican is going to win here nonetheless, 100%, but the margin is not going to be over 15% for either of them. And so this just shows how close these Senate elections are going to be. 46-46 with all of the solid and likely states filled in. It is going to be these 8 lean races that decide the makeup of the U.S. Senate. I mean, if you look at the 538 forecast for these Senate elections, I mean, the Republicans have a 52% chance of winning, 48 for the Democrats. These Senate elections really are hyper competitive, and both parties are fully in the race still to win control of the upper chamber. And so now we can move on to the lean states on this map. These are states in which you would expect margins of between 1 and 5%. And basically, these races are going to be highly competitive ones, but one party does have a clear advantage in them. And so I'm going to start off with the state of Ohio. This is a race that is surprisingly competitive. The Republican Party really should be doing a lot better than they are. They're actually down in the polls currently. According to the polling average on 538, Tim Ryan leads by a margin of 2%. I mean, this is an abysmal number for the Republican Party. I know I've said that a lot, but Tim Ryan is proving to be a very strong candidate against J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance is not the incumbent. Of course, Rob Portman, the incumbent, is no longer going to be serving in the Senate after this term. He is retiring, so J.D. Vance is the new Republican nominee who barely won his primary, even with the support of Donald Trump. And so looking at this race here, it should not be as close as it is. Democrats should not be leading in the polls here. I mean, this was a state that Donald Trump won by 8%. Now, in the end, it is very unlikely, though, that Tim Ryan is going to end up winning. I think that we'll have to see a lot more, even better polling numbers, honestly, for Tim Ryan if we want to see the Democrats win here. In 2018, Sherrod Brown led by larger margins than Tim Ryan, and of course, he only ended up winning this race by around 6% when the polls suggested a very solid margin of victory for him in basically all of the polls released. So I think that right now, the Democrats are going to underperform the polling here. It is very unlikely they're going to win, but the race, I think, is still going to be highly competitive. I do think that there's a good chance that the margin here actually falls under 5% for the GOP. Now, moving on to the state state of North Carolina, we also have a highly competitive race here as well, but I do think the Republicans are doing a little bit better here. North Carolina, the two candidates, Ted Budd and Sherry Beasley, are just a lot more traditional candidates for both parties. I think there's less of a chance of there being a big upset in this state. North Carolina is still a state that heavily favors the Republican Party. Democrats have not been able to win here on the presidential level since 2008, and despite trying very hard in this race in 2020, they still lost the race. Cal Cunningham, who led in all of the final polls released, still ended up losing to incumbent Tom Tillis. And so that is why this time around, with Ted Budd actually ahead by 1.8%, I think it would be very difficult right now for Sherry Beasley to end up winning, but we're just going to have to see what new numbers come out of the state in the coming months. But right now, the Republican Party clearly does have the advantage in the pretty competitive race, though, still of North Carolina. And so that is why both of these races I'm going to give to the GOP. I'll also give the GOP the race in the state of Wisconsin, with Ron Johnson running for a third term in office. Now, Ron Johnson is really not that popular in the state, but I do think he's somebody that can win in 2022. He did win in 2016 and 2010, and honestly, if the environment was not as favorable for the Republicans as it was, I do think that this race would be a lot more competitive. Mandela Barnes is a pretty competitive challenger to Ron Johnson, but I mean, just looking at the national environment here, it would be difficult for the Democrats to make a flip in a state like Wisconsin. So right now, even though Ron Johnson is behind in the latest polling against Mandela Barnes, I do think that he will hold on to his state and win a third term in office. The Republican Party, I think, did a good job convincing Ron Johnson to run. I think that if this seat was left open, the Democratic Party would have a much better chance at this race. I mean, really depending on who the Republicans would nominate instead. But Ron Johnson running for re-election was a smart move for the Republican Party. And so this, of course, means that Wisconsin is going to be the 49th state on the map for the GOP. I do have 3 lean Democratic states on this map as well, starting off with the state of New Hampshire, with Maggie Hassan running for her second term in office. She was first elected in 2016, where she defeated Republican incumbent Kelly Ayotte, who was elected in 2010. So this was one of the only 2 flips in 2016, the other one being Tammy Duckworth, who defeated Mark Kirk in Illinois, and of course New Hampshire was the closest election of the year. But this time around, I think the race does favor Maggie Hassan a lot more. 2016, she had to flip the state, defeating a Republican incumbent that was a former governor of the state, but this time around, Maggie Hassan will face an easier challenge, most likely from Chuck Morse. Chuck Morse is most likely to win the Republican nomination here. The nomination is not until over a month in the future from now, but if we look at the latest polling data, though, Chuck Morse is the only candidate out of Boldo, Smith, and Morse to have led in any poll over Maggie Hassan, with Chuck Morse led by 2% in a poll released all the way back in April. However, the most recent 3 polls released just a couple of weeks ago show Maggie Hassan ahead by 4% against Donald Boldo as well as Smith, and against Chuck Morse, Maggie Hassan leads by a margin of 3%. So this race is likely to be very close nonetheless, but Maggie Hassan does have a clear advantage and has been polling pretty favorably for the past year or so as well. So the state of New Hampshire, I am going to give the Democratic Party. I do think the Maggie Hassan is electable in the state. If we look at the 2020 results, I mean, Jean Shaheen won by a margin of 15%. So New Hampshire definitely is a state that the Democratic Party has an advantage in, but I mean, even if you look at the numbers, the race is going to be very competitive still. And the next 2 states are states that I've struggled to give the lean categorization into Democrats in the past, but now I will categorize both of these states as being lean for the Democratic Party, starting off with the state of Pennsylvania, where we have a race between, of course, Mehmet Oz and John Fetterman. 2016, we saw the re-election of Pat Toomey, but Pat Toomey will be retiring after this term, so Mehmet Oz is the new Republican nominee. John Fetterman is the Democratic challenger for this seat, and honestly, none of these candidates have been on the campaign trail over the last couple of weeks. John Fetterman just survived a stroke before the Democratic primary race, and Mehmet Oz has been in Missouri for some reason and not campaigning in the state of Pennsylvania. Mehmet Oz does not even live in the state, and he really has no connections to the state of Pennsylvania. He's one of those celebrity candidates that's trying to win a political seat, but I think it will be very difficult for him. I mean, look at the 2016 race. Pat Toomey only won by 1.5%. If we look at the race in 2022, Mehmet Oz, I don't think is even comparable to Pat Toomey as a candidate, and if we look at the polling for this race, John Fetterman leads by 4, 6, and 9%, according to the 3 latest polls released, all from the month of June, with Mehmet Oz as the Republican nominee already. So the race in Pennsylvania is looking very unfavorably for the Republican Party. I mean, this is the one seat Democrats have a good chance at flipping. I mean, again, this is a seat that the Republicans currently hold, so it would make their chances of flipping back the Senate a lot more difficult if they lost the seat with Oz as the nominee. And of course, Oz did get the endorsement of Donald Trump as well. Basically, every single one of the poor nominees that I have criticized for not being electable were endorsed by Donald Trump. So that's why I think Donald Trump really is hurting the GOP's chances at flipping back the Senate. And the final state I have left on this map is the state of Arizona, where Mark Kelly is running for his first full term in office. He, of course, was elected in the 2020 special election against Martha McSally, and this time around, he will be the incumbent running for his first full term. So on the Republican side, Blake Masters is likely to win the Republican nomination. He did receive the endorsement of Donald Trump, and typically that would be enough for him to win the race. He is actually behind in the latest poll, but the odds do still favor him. Blake Masters is still likely to end up on top with the support of Donald Trump. But I mean, if you look at the polls between Mark Kelly and basically every single potential Republican that he may face, whether it's Blake Masters or it's Mark Bronovich or it's Jim Lamont, all of the Republican nominees are not performing well against Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly even defeated Doug Ducey in a hypothetical poll. Of course, Ducey is not running for the seat, but Mark Kelly is leading by strong margins in all of the recent polls released. Obviously, I don't think he's going to win by double digits. I don't think he can even win by 6%, but I do think that he will end up coming on top. He is popular in his state, a lot more popular than Kyrsten Sinema. Kyrsten Sinema, if she was running in this race, I do think that she would lose. She's lost the support of the progressive left, but Mark Kelly right now is favored to win in the state of Arizona. 538, I mean, gives him a 60% chance at victory. And so Arizona, I am going to categorize as being lean for the Democratic Party. Just like Pennsylvania, of course, it is going to be very, very competitive, but I do see the Democratic Party having a slight edge in the state. And of course, now we have two more states left on this map, the two tilt states. These are really the true toss-up states that really could go either way. I mean, look at just how competitive these Senate elections are going to be. With the two toss-up races, it is still 49-49 in exact tie. So starting off with the state of Nevada, I am going to give it to the Democratic Party. I am going to give it to Catherine Cortez Masto. Obviously, the tilt state, it could still go to the GOP here with Adam Laxalt as the Republican nominee, but I do think right now the Democratic Party does have an advantage in the state. The Roe v. Wade issue is going to benefit Democrats. Of course, Nevada is the most pro-choice state in the country, and if we look at the polls, Catherine Cortez Masto is ahead. If we look at the recent polls, though, Catherine Cortez Masto has led in all of them, and Adam Laxalt has not led in a poll since mid-April. Of course, this poll was funded by the GOP. So the most recent poll that Adam Laxalt has led in that was not funded by a GOP sponsor was all the way back at the very beginning of the month of April, over 3 months ago. So I do think Catherine Cortez Masto is in a good spot for her re-election. Obviously, she is, in my opinion, still the most vulnerable Democrat running for their re-election. She is doing still worse than Steve Sisolak on the gubernatorial level, but I do think that as of right now, she has a very slight advantage in this race. She won in 2016 by 2.4%. I don't think she'll win by over 1% this time around, even if she does win, but I do think that she does have the ability to defeat Adam Laxalt and win her second term in office. Now, the other tilt state I have on this map is the state of Georgia, and I will also be giving it to the Democratic Party. I think Democrats will actually do better in Georgia than in Nevada, even though, of course, Nevada has a much longer history of voting for Democrats. Georgia only very recently flipped for the Democratic Party on the presidential level in 2020. So looking at the Georgia Senate race, of course, this is one that we've gone over a lot in the last year. It will be between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker, and of course, Herschel Walker has just proven, honestly, to be the worst out of all of the Republican nominees that I have criticized. Yes, Democratic nominees are not perfect, but in terms of electability, they are doing much better than the Republicans, and that is why they're leading in polls in 53 states. So looking at the Georgia Senate race, Raphael Warnock is ahead by a margin of 1.3% on average. If we look at the actual polls released, Warnock has basically led in all of the recent polls released. There was one poll a couple of weeks ago showing Walker ahead by 2%, but before that, the last poll that Herschel Walker led in, you have to go all the way back to the middle of the month of April, and a poll funded by Walker's very own campaign only showed an even race between the two candidates. So the numbers here for Walker are not good, and I mean, he had a big lead in the state at one point. He led in a lot of the polls at the beginning of this year, but simply the things that are coming out about him, about his past, as well as just the nonsensical things he's saying on the campaign trail, they are starting to add up, and they are hurting the Republicans here in Georgia. I don't think Donald Trump is going to help either, and I mean, the polls in Georgia are pretty accurate. They were spot on in the Georgia runoff elections, and they were also pretty accurate for the 2020 presidential elections. Like, 1.3% margin is significant. It's not going to be like in Ohio where Democrats are almost guaranteed to underperform. 1.3% means the Democratic Party does have a clear advantage in the state. So right now, Georgia is also going to be tilt for the Democratic Party. And so yes, right now, for the first time, I believe in almost a year, I'm going to give the Democratic Party 51 seats on the Senate level. I do think they will hold on to the upper chamber, at least at this point in time. We're going to have to see what happens. I do think Ohio and North Carolina could actually be more solid for the Republicans, but Nevada and Georgia currently, I'm going to classify them as tilt Democratic states, and these are the two states that are going to give Democrats the victory here. But again, I mean, these are tilt states. These states really could go either way. I did raise my projections for both Pennsylvania and Arizona. I think the Democratic Party will do a little bit better in those two states, just with the strong candidates that they are running. And so right now, on the 21st of July, I'm predicting a map of 51 for the Democrats and 49 for the Republicans. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you tell me how you feel about this map in the comments below. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you have not, and I'll see you guys in the next video.